In a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests lived two brothers, Eze and Obina. Eze, the elder of the two, was known for his hard work, resilience, and wisdom. From a young age, he had proven himself to be a man of ambition, tirelessly building a successful rice business that eventually made him the wealthiest man in the village. His fortune was not just the result of luck, but the culmination of years of dedication and integrity. Eze was a pillar of the community, respected by all who knew him. Obina, on the other hand, was a stark contrast to his brother. He was lazy, envious, and driven by greed. While Eze labored in the fields, managing his business and helping the village, Obina was often found lounging in the shade, scheming ways to take shortcuts in life. His resentment toward his brother's success festered over the years, and he dreamed of one day stealing Eze's wealth, convinced that he deserved it more. Eze married the love of his life, Nkechi, a beautiful and wise woman. Together they had two daughters, but no sons. Nkechi feared for the future of their family, knowing that without a male heir, their wealth would not last. Though they loved their daughters dearly, it was clear that a son was necessary to inherit the business and continue the family legacy. Years passed, but Nkechi remained unable to conceive a son, and anxiety crept into her heart. In a desperate attempt to secure an heir, Nkechi decided to take a drastic step. She took a second wife, a younger woman named Ijoma, hoping that the new wife might bear the longed for son. However, Ijoma gave birth to three daughters and no son. The pressure mounted, and the family's future seemed increasingly uncertain. Despite the lack of a male heir, Eze's love for both wives remained unwavering, and they carried on, supporting one another through the challenges that life presented. Obina, however, saw this as an opportunity. The loss of a male heir meant that in his mind, Eze's wealth was up for grabs. He watched as his brother's family struggled, and bitterness festered in his heart. He could not wait for the day when he would claim Easy's fortune for himself. That day came far sooner than anyone expected. Ise died under mysterious circumstances. The villagers were shocked, but no one suspected foul play at first. The grief stricken wives, still deep in mourning, found themselves vulnerable, and Obina, ever the opportunist, wasted no time in taking advantage of their sorrow. He convinced Ijoma to sell off all of Easy's properties and the family's rice business, promising to keep the wealth within the family. With the money, he bought a new house and a brand new truck, positioning himself as the new wealthy man in the village. Enkichi, devastated by her husband's sudden death and the loss of their wealth, fell into a deep despair. She had no son to carry on the legacy, and her wealth was slipping away. But in her grief, something in her stirred a desire for justice. She turned to the spirits, calling on her ancestors to seek vengeance for her and her children. In a fit of anguish, she swore that if Obina had a hand in her husband's death, or if he had caused any part of her suffering, may he be cursed forever. She cried into the night, invoking a powerful curse. If my husband's death was caused by the hands of Obina, may his new truck be involved in a ghastly accident never to recover. May his house be stolen from him, and may he lose his life in a mysterious fire. The wind howled through the windows as her words echoed into the darkness. It was done. She had called forth a curse, one that would alter the course of Obina's life forever. But the curse would not end with Obina. His descendants would also feel the consequences of his wickedness, and the family would be doomed to live with the repercussions for generations. The curse struck swiftly. Within weeks, Obina's new truck, the symbol of his stolen wealth, was involved in a horrific accident. The truck was completely destroyed, beyond repair. No matter what Obina tried, there was no way to salvage it. Then, just as quickly, his new house was taken from him. A group of strangers, unknown to the villagers, came one night and forcibly seized the property. Obina was left homeless, his wealth slipping through his fingers like sand. The villagers watched in silence, unsure of what to make of these events. But one thing became clear. They all believed that Obina's actions had triggered the curse, and that his dark deeds had finally caught up with him. The man who had plotted for so long to steal his brother's legacy was now paying the price. In a final tragic twist of fate, Obina's life was claimed by a mysterious fire. His body was discovered in the remains of a small shack on the outskirts of the village, burned beyond recognition. The cause of the fire was never determined, but the circumstances surrounding his death raised more questions than answers. Some believed it was a result of Obina's own reckless behavior, while others whispered that the curse had come to collect its due. Either way, the villagers were certain of one thing: Obina's fate was sealed by his own greed and treachery. But the curse did not end with Obina. It extended to his family. His daughters, once full of promise, found themselves cursed with infertility. No matter what they did, they could not conceive. The men of the family fared no better. Businesses collapsed and marriages crumbled. The family's misfortune deepened with each passing year. The youngest daughter of Obina, who had once been a vibrant and strong willed woman, fell into madness. She began speaking to spirits, claiming that they were tormenting her. She would wander around the house, muttering in a voice that no one could understand, as if possessed by an unseen force. The family's once proud home became haunted, the air thick with an unsettling presence. Strange occurrences became commonplace. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without explanation, and the walls seemed to echo with whispers from the beyond. The family could no longer ignore the price they were paying for Obina's sins. In the midst of this growing chaos, the youngest daughter of Obina, now married to a kind hearted man with a young child from a previous marriage, began to show her true nature. The man, hoping to build a loving family, welcomed his new wife and child with open arms. But the youngest daughter of Obina, driven by spite and bitterness, began to mistreat the child. Whenever her husband left for business, she would lock the girl in a room, denying her food and care. She would treat the child with cruelty, refusing to show any kindness. When her husband discovered the abuse, he was horrified. He confronted his wife, demanding an explanation for her actions. She, however, showed no remorse. "A child not my own is not my responsibility," she said, her voice cold and devoid of empathy. Desperate and unable to bear the pain of seeing his child mistreated, the man turned to the gods, seeking a solution. He consulted the village elders, and together they performed a ritual to ask for guidance. The gods, seeing the wickedness in the youngest daughter's heart, decreed that she would be punished for her cruelty. The punishment would come swiftly. The youngest daughter's sanity began to unravel. She fell into madness, speaking of voices that only she could hear and seeing things that no one else could. Her mind fractured, and she wandered the house, crying out in terror. Her once bright eyes were now empty and lost. Her husband, devastated by her transformation, could do nothing but watch as she spiraled into madness. The villagers, once sympathetic, now feared the woman who had become a shadow of her former self. The family, seeking any way out, consulted a native doctor. After performing a ritual, the doctor revealed the painful truth. Obina's sins had cursed his descendants, and they would never be free until they made amends. The family was told that they must publicly apologize to Izi's family and the villagers and complete a series of rituals to lift the curse. But the descendants of Obina were unwilling to humble themselves. They refused to take responsibility for their father's actions, and instead they devised a plan. They manipulated the youngest daughter, still naive and vulnerable, into performing a prayer session of forgiveness on their behalf. They convinced her that this would lift the curse and bring peace to the family. Months passed, and at first it seemed that the curse had lifted. Some of the women in the family became pregnant, and children were born. It was as if the family had finally found a way to escape the darkness. But the relief was fleeting. Years later, the eldest son of Obina's family began to exhibit strange behavior. His mind, once sharp, began to unravel. He became violent, unpredictable, and distant. His behavior terrified his family, and soon he was no longer recognizable as the man he once was. The curse had returned, and this time it was worse than before. The villagers, who had long suspected Obina's involvement in his brother's deaths, were no longer surprised. They had seen the destruction that greed and betrayal could bring. Obina's descendants would never escape the consequences of his actions. The curse had claimed them all, one by one. And as the family's misfortune continued, the villagers would continue to tell the tale of Obina's wickedness, a warning to all who would dare to betray the spirits and the laws of justice.